Perek Gimel Mishnah Daled. The Tana, always Perek Gimel Mishnah Daled, states as follows: Rabbi Chanina ben Chachinoi Omer, Hanera Balayla, V'amahalach B'derech Yechidi, V'amafana Liboy Levatola, Harezeh Mischayev Benafshei. If a person is up at night, he goes alone on a journey, and he distracts himself from learning. He is not engaged in limud Torah. He turns his heart to divrei batola, dvorim betelim. He's mischayev benafshei. He is risking his life. So what does this mean? Bittul Torah is a terrible avera, whether it's during the day or during the night. Why the dogage, the emphasis that if he's at night, it's at nighttime, and he's mefana libe levatola, he's mischayev benafshei. The Bartanura learns the Mishnah as a continuum. He learns that if a person is awake at night, the night is a dangerous time. The mazikim are out at night. He's mahalach b'derech yechidi. He goes on the journey alone. Traveling alone on the journey is dangerous. And he's mafana liba levatola. And he's not engaged in the Torah. The Torah would have protected him. The Torah magna matzle. The Torah would have protected him. And if he's mafana liba levatola, he's mechayez benafshei. He's endangering his life because he's in a dangerous place without the protection of the Torah. Rabbeinu Yoina learns it somewhat differently. He learns the Mishnah that it's not connected to the previous parts of the Mishnah. If a person is at night, it's the nighttime, and is mefana liba levatola, and he's not engaged in Torah, he's m'chai benafshei, he risks his life. Because the night is the precious time for learning Torah. The night is a quiet time, a tranquil time, a peaceful time. That's the time when he should be learning Torah. He doesn't have the distractions. He doesn't have his daily activities. He's not engaged in his business affairs. He should be learning Torah. That's a precious time to learn Torah. And if he's mefana liba levatol, he's mischai benafshei. He squandered this opportunity. He's wasted these precious hours of the nighttime. The Rambam seems to be learning it in the same manner, but he seems to be taking it a step further. And let me quote for you the words of the holy words of the Rambam. And he goes at great length describing about limud HaTorah at night. In Hilchos Talmud Torah, the Rambam states as follows. He says, "Ein divrei Torah miskayim b'mish merapas maleim." Divrei Torah, it cannot have a kiyum in somebody who is weak and lacks in his divrei Torah and is learning the Torah. Not those who eat from a position, a place of comfort, of eating and drinking and pampering themselves. Person who afflicts himself over divrei Torah, he toils and labors, even though it's difficult and he has to suffer through it. And he should not give sleep to his eyes. He should be constantly pushing away the sleep and learning even though he's tired and exhausted. That's how divrei Torah is miskayim in a person. And he continues. And he says in Perek Gimel Halacha Yud Gimel, Afal pi shemitzah lilmod b'yom v'layla, ein adam lamed roiv chachmasa el b'layla. It's a mitzvah to learn day and night, but most of the chachma, the majority, is at night. Amar chachamim, ein rina shel Torah b'layla. The rina of Torah, the song, the beauty of the Torah is from the night. Shenemar kumi roini b'layla. So he talks about learning at night, and it seems to be an added dimension, more than Rabbeinu Yoina. And it's not only because it's a peaceful time and a tranquil time. But there's something special about the learning at night that brings upon him the rina of Torah. That beauty, that song of the Torah. What is that dimension at night? Why is that so precious? Why even more than the day? The Rambam continues and he says, Lefichach, why a person wants to be crowned with the crown of the Torah. He should be careful with all of his night times. And he should not squander not even one of them, not with eating and drinking and with sicha, with shmuzing, etc. He should not squander even one of them. Why is the Rambam emphasizing that he should not waste his time at night and squander them with eating and drinking and partying, etc.? Wouldn't it be sufficient to say he, as he already did, he should be learning with Omal v'Yegiyah, and he should not waste any of his nights. He should be learning constantly in the nighttime. So understood. If he has to be learning at the nighttime, and he shouldn't be wasting his time, it's understood. He should not be squandering it with partying, with eating and drinking and sicha. Why is he making and emphasizing this? What's the emphasis on this? Just to continue and conclude with the words of the Rambam on the learning at nighttime. So the Rambam says, if a person is oisik b'Torah b'layla, chut shel chesed nimshach b'yom. He has a chut shel chesed, strand of chesed that extends to him during the daytime. He has this hadras panim from his learning at night. Shenemar yoimam yitzav Hashem chazdoi uvelayla shira imi. The shira of Torah, the song of Torah, the rina of the Torah, the beauty, the simcha, the song of Torah emanates from the learning at night. Why is that so? What is so special about the learning at nighttime? Why is that so great? Yes, as the Rabbeinu Yonah says, it's a time where a person doesn't have distractions, and he can concentrate and focus clearly on his learning. Yes, that is so. But what is this special rina of Torah, the shira of Torah, the chut shel chesed of Torah? Why is the Rambam emphasizing that he should not waste any of his nights? He has to push sleep away from his eyes. He should not engage in achila v'shtia v'sicha. Perhaps the pshat is as follows: that the keser of Torah, the kinyan of Torah, comes with Omal v'Yegiyah, with self-sacrifice, with concentration, wholehearted concentration, and learning with hasmana, day and night. But it comes also with a different level of self-sacrifice. It comes with a level of self-sacrifice, which means when the rest of the world, when other people are engaged in achila v'shticha, when, as the custom is, that in the nighttime, the evening time, that's the time when other people perhaps are partying, other people have mishtas, other people have simchas. At the time when the minhag olam, the custom of the world, when the minhag olam is when people are engaged in achila v'shtiya v'sicha, in partying, in wasting their time, in pampering themselves, at that time, and particularly at that time, when a person devotes himself and has a self-sacrifice and engaged wholeheartedly in limud Torah, sacrificing idun nefesh, idun guf, pushing the sleep away from his eyes, but also having the strength and commitment and devotion to learn wholeheartedly, to be engaged in Torah, to devote himself exclusively to Torah, particularly at those times when the rest of the world is partying. He has a chut shel chesed, is nimshach alav b'yom, and he becomes close to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and he has a kinyan in Torah, and he comes close to the Sisrei HaTorah, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu is mashpia on him, the shefa of Torah and chesed and simcha, and the simcha of Torah. And through that limud HaTorah, he can be zeicha to gadlus HaTorah. And let me illustrate this with a maisa. It's a famous Maisa. I had the great zechus to question the Bala Maisa about this at a certain point in time to verify an aspect of this particular Maisa. As well known, the great Yeshiva Chachmei Lublin, founded by Rabbi Shapiro Zatzal, established to be one of the greatest yeshivas in the world. A yeshiva that would attract the best bachrim and have the best facilities for them, and a dormitory and food. A yeshiva that would attract the best minds, the best rabbeim, the best talmidim, and people from all over Europe came to that yeshiva, the best talmidim. It was one of the most sought-after yeshivas. And applications came from all over Europe. So from every city, every town, the best bacher, the best couple of bachrim would come and apply. And the entrance examination was very, very difficult. So there was one bacher who was known in his town as being an outstanding bacher. But he came from a different part of Europe, Oberland. And Lublin was a different part of the world. The culture was very different between Galicia, Poland, Lithuania, Russia, and Hungary, and Austria, and very different cultures and very different backgrounds. So this bacher, who was known as a Metzuyan, came to apply to the Yeshiva Chachmei Lublin, and he had his entrance exam. And Rameir Shapiro Zatzal, he himself personally faher the bacher, and he gave this bacher a faher, and he examined this bacher, and I suspect he was trying to test this bacher and to see if he really would fit into the yeshiva. So he told him at the end of the fair, I'm very sorry, you don't fit into this yeshiva, you don't belong to the yeshiva, you should pack your bags and take the next train and go back home. And you can imagine how devastated this bacher must have been. Here is a Metzuyan from his city, traveling to Lublin and expecting and hoping to get accepted in the yeshiva and to return home with this embarrassment and this busha of being rejected from the yeshiva. How devastating must have this been to a young bacher. But this was the gzeira, and this is what he was obligated to do. So later that day, Rav Meir Shapiro Zatzal walked into the Beis Medrash, and he sees this young bacher learning in the yeshiva, learning in the Beis Medrash. So he came over to him and he said, didn't I tell you that you're not accepted? Didn't I tell you that you should go home and take the first train and go home? And the bacher said, yes, Rabbina, but bitte, the train is not leaving yet. The train is not leaving for another few hours. And I still have some time to learn before the train leaves. So I was just learning in the Beis Medrash until it's time to go. Rameir Shapiro looked at him and said, you belong here. You belong in this yeshiva. This is where you belong. Stay here. Go, unpack your bags. This is where you belong. The Pirkei of Rameir Shapiro, Zatzal. So this bacher remained in the yeshiva. He remained in Lublin, and he applied himself diligently, yomim v'layla, learning day and night, b'hasmada rabbah, learning day and night and day. And he grew in Limud Torah. And they said about him that he did not step outside the four walls of the yeshiva for a year and a half. For a year and a half, he was in the yeshiva without setting foot outside. He didn't go home for Yom Tovim. He didn't go home. There was no break at all. Even when it was Pesach, Sukkot, he didn't go home. He stayed in the yeshiva. The yeshiva had everything. The yeshiva had food. They had davening. They had a mikveh. They had a barber. When the Bachram was a barber in the yeshiva, he did not set foot for a year and a half. Finally, after a year and a half, he made a trip back home. But he didn't set foot out of the yeshiva for a year and a half straight, not seeing the daylight, not smelling the fresh air outside the walls of the yeshiva. And he grew. He grew in Torah. He grew and became one of the greatest Paiskim. Became, at one point, the Paisik Ador. Became a Godel B'Yisrael. And I had occasion and the great fortune to spend time with this Godel B'Yisrael. And I asked the Shevet HaLevi, Rosh Shmuel Vosner Zatzal, I asked him, is it true that the Rosh Yeshiva did not set foot out of the yeshiva for a year and a half, did not set foot out of the yeshiva for a year and a half straight? He smiled at me and he said, Azoi Zokma, that's what they say. And he smiled. The great Milan, the Keser HaTorah, from learning Torah, not only learning Torah, self-sacrifice of Torah, but not only this learning and the self-sacrifice, the devotion to learning Torah even when it's so difficult, especially when it's so difficult, even when one has to afflict themselves, and especially when the rest of the world is partying. But to devote oneself to Liman HaTorah with self-sacrifice, that enables one to be Zeicha not only to learn Torah, but to be Zeicha to the Keser Shel Torah, the Rina of Torah, the Shira of Torah. We should all be Zeicha and have the Chut Shel Chesed should be Nimshach. It should be Nimshach on us the entire day and the entire